Hello, welcome back to Life Enrichment with Hank Ballinger. 3 banks go bust. A good time to buy. I'd like to, before we get into today's lesson, say thank you to all those who have been watching the channel. And also, I'd like to say, if you could, hit that like button and hit that subscription button. Subscribe to the channel. Appreciate it. And again, thanks to all those who have been watching. Thank you. This weekend, if you keep up with finance and banks, you will know that 3 banks this past weekend went belly up. Silvergate, Silicon Valley Bank, and Signature Bank. Now, when that happens, it will generally send a shock wave through the financial economy. Now, those shock waves are an indicator to many, and it scares them, and they say, it's time to get out. Let's go, let's get out. But to many that know what's going on, that is probably the indicator that tells you it's time to either get in or time to buy more. I want to talk about that today in the lesson. This is called the sky is falling syndrome. Many of you probably remember Chicken Little from your grade school days. The sky is falling syndrome, many people have. Soon as just something little goes wrong in life, oh, the sky is falling, let's get out, let's leave, let's get out of whatever we're in because everything's going to go bust. Probably the wrong way to think. If you remember the dot-com crash back in the early 2000s. Let me tell you a little story about when I got into real estate. I got into real estate in 2004. That was right after the dot-com crash. Everybody said, bad time to get in. Don't get into real estate. Oh, you'll lose your shirt. Don't get into real estate. It was a very good time. Very good time to get into real estate. Also, the GFC, or the Great Financial Crisis, 2008 and 9, the housing crash, as many calls it. A lot of people said during that time, oh, you better get out. You better get out of real estate. Real estate's tanking. It's going down. No, what happened was many people who had bad mortgages and a lot of mortgage-backed securities that were very leveraged and very risky, even ninja loan mortgage-backed securities, those loans were bad, and banks were very long or had a lot of those on their balance sheet, and the banks became very toxic or risky, and those banks went out, but the housing industry and those who knew what they were doing, bought the homes right, did very well. The GFC was a very good time for me. And right after the GFC, the Great Financial Crisis, was a great time. You could pick up real estate for pennies on the dollar. So if you notice, the dot-com crash, the GFC, and the pandemic, a lot of people would say, well, those are the times to get out. And all 3 of these times, people told me, don't get in, get out, and get out. 3 of the best times that I've had in building wealth in real estate. The pandemic from 2020 to 2022. Great time for real estate if you buy right and if you know what you're doing. Again, you always have to do your due diligence. You have to put boots on the ground when you go look at property when you're starting out, and you have to study and know what you're doing. But if you do those things, every time there's an economic downturn, oh, that's the time to get in. That's the times you're looking for. The dot-com crashes, the GFCs, the pandemics, those are really good times. When things go bust, it's time to buy. Now, many of you have probably heard of a fellow by the name of Robert Kiyosaki. His book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, great book. Many people have read it. It has helped many people, probably millions of people, to be able to build wealth. He says this, crashes make me rich. I've heard him say that many times, and he's right. So as an entrepreneur, as someone who's wanting to build wealth, you look for crashes. You look for downturns in the economy. You look for times when banks go bust. Now, with this idea, another very famous guy named Warren Buffett, he says it like this. He says, when the waves go out, when the water recedes, you find out who's been swimming naked. So it's interesting that in times of bust, when the banks go bust, when housing market goes belly up, those who know what they're doing do very well. Those are the good times. Now, this seems like negative, a lot of pandemics, GFCs, a lot of tough times. Most people would say, get out, time to go, time to bail, time to get out. Let's look at the times in history when most millionaires in American history were made. First of all, the Great Depression, 1929. Most people would say, oh, it was a tough time, and they're not wrong. It was a tough time for many. Many lost their houses. Many lost their jobs. Many people were hungry. It was a tough time. A lot of rationing going on. But for those who knew what they were doing and really understood economic downturns and economic how to get ahead economically, for them, it was a great time. So as an entrepreneur, these are the very things you're looking for. Those are the very things that will make you wealthy. Now the GFC, the Great Financial Crisis of 2008 and 9, this time, 2008 and 9, and directly after it, from about 2010 to 12, this is when the second most amount of people became wealthy in American history, right behind the Great Depression. So it's the economic downturns, it's the tough times when you find out who really knows what they're doing and who is probably going to go belly up. And then the pandemic. I don't know that I have the statistics and the numbers, but I would be willing to say that many people have become very wealthy during this pandemic. If you've had real estate, specifically apartments, you will know that rental prices have gone up. You keep your debt service the same to the bank, but your rents go up. Now, yeah, a lot of other things go up, your taxes, your insurance, everything you buy, a lot of your expenses go up. But you can keep your debt service to the bank the same and raise your rents. So you can come out on this. So the pandemic has been good to those who know what they're looking for. Now, let's look at a little saying. I love to use this saying. I have no idea who came up with this. I read it years ago, but it's very true. If you're looking to be an entrepreneur and you're looking to get ahead, a good economy is a good time to buy real estate. But a bad economy is a great time to buy real estate. That is very, very true. And in my times of building wealth and buying real estate, I found that to be very true with the dot-com crash, the GFC, and the pandemic. The bad times are the great times if you're wanting to build wealth. Now, why is that? Why is this true? For those who are looking for the bad times, for like Robert Kiyosaki, who says the tough times are the ones that make me wealthy. They're what makes me rich. Why is that? Well, first of all, a lot of sellers, a lot of people that have real estate, when they see things starting to implode or cave in on themselves, they say, oh, I better get out. I got to sell. So they will sell their real estate, and sometimes they sell it for pennies on the dollar. They sell it quick because they think I better get out before the whole thing crumbles in. And they sell cheap. So that is a good time to buy. So if you can find a seller who's willing to sell cheap, a lot of times that's right after an economic downturn. I'm not saying take advantage of people, but what I am saying is that when economic downturns happen, it's the time to go out and start becoming very aggressive. Not that you shouldn't be aggressive all the time, but that's a really good time to be very aggressive. Banks always need to make loans. That's their business. They're in the business of loaning you and me money. So if that's their job, I think maybe we should oblige them in that job. We should go and take some of their money. So in an economic downturn, go find some real estate that you can buy and go to the bank. And not only do banks loan money, but right after an economic downturn, it is probably a great time to haggle with that bank on terms. You know, you might go into that bank and say, listen, I'd like to buy this property and you know, I'd like to get my loan through you. You know, we go way back, or, you know, maybe, I really like you. I like your bank, but you know what? That 7% interest rate, you know what? I'm really needing like a 6% interest rate. And they may come back and say, well, listen, we could probably go 6.5, or we could go 6.25 on the interest rate. So they're willing to haggle a lot of time after an economic downturn. If you hadn't asked, you'd have been paying 7%. A lot of times you go in, maybe people start pulling back and not going in to buy real estate after an economic downturn. They think, well, if I have real estate, I need to sell it. But if I don't have it, it's not the time to get in. Times are tough. That is the time to get in. I'm not telling people to buy real estate. I don't give economic advice. I give economic information. What you do with it is up to you. But it is very easy to haggle with a bank if a lot of other people after an economic downturn are not going into the bank to get a loan. They still want to make loans. So if you do go in, you can haggle with them on terms. And if they say the interest rate's 7%, you may say, well, I'd really need 6%. They may come down to 6.5, 6.25. You're still getting it better than 7. They may say, well, we need to amortize that on 20 years. You may need to say, well, listen, I really need to get my cash flow up. I really need to amortize that on 25 years. I need a 25-year loan. And many times they're willing to do it. So it's a good time to haggle with banks after an economic downturn. That's a good time to buy real estate. That's the time to go ahead and become aggressive. And then last of all, real estate. Very important point here. Real estate is the best and the most pristine monetary asset of all time. Since Adam and Eve, real estate has been the most pristine monetary asset ever. Better than T-bills, bonds, mortgage-backed securities, corporate bonds, anything, stock, crypto, definitely better than those. So it's the best. It is by far the best monetary asset you can get. So after an economic downturn, and I would say maybe 3 banks going bust, might be considered an economic downturn. Now, if you're watching a lot of podcasts like I do right now, this past weekend, 3 banks went down, and the financial shock wave that's gone out throughout the financial community, they're looking at other banks and they're saying, well, which other banks are going to go down? How many more banks are going to go down? That's something you got to be wary about. Start looking around. The more banks that go down, probably the better time it is to buy something and probably get it on the cheap. Something to look at. So when the economy has a downturn, that's the time you need to be going out and looking for real estate because you can get it cheap. And don't worry. Most people start panicking. That's the time to not panic. Be very calm. And it's time to buy. For those who want to be redneck rich when everybody else is in a panic, that's time to be calm and time to buy real estate. Thank you.